opened his eyes in the darkness of the waste processing deck. The smell of chemicals burned his nose, but he had stopped noticing it years ago. This was his home. This was where the had decided he belonged. He sat up slowly, feeling the cold metal floor against his scales. His scales were softer than the pure. They were a mix of green and pale human skin that made him look sick to everyone who saw him. The other workers on the deck were already moving, their heavy footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors. None of them looked at him. None of them ever did. Was 16 years old, though he was not sure of his exact birthday. His mother had been a human woman named. She had been captured during a raid on a human colony and brought to the warship as a prisoner. She had fallen pregnant with the child of an officer, though never learned if it was by choice or by force. She died giving birth to him. The only thing he knew about her was her name and that she had golden hair. He had never seen golden hair in his life. They were a proud and ancient species. They were tall, covered in thick green scales, and they believed they were superior to all other beings in the galaxy. They had no room for something like a hybrid, a mistake, a creature that should not exist. He walked to his workstation and began sorting through the waste containers. His job was to separate the recyclable materials from the garbage. It was dirty work and the fumes made his lungs hurt, but it was the only job they would give him. The other workers had better positions. They operated machines, supervised the lower decks, or trained for military service. Was not allowed to do any of those things. He was not even allowed to eat with them. His food came in a small metal box, delivered once a day, always cold and tasteless. A large named walked past him and shoved his shoulder hard, stumbled but did not fall. He had learned long ago not to fall. Falling meant showing weakness, and showing weakness meant more pain. "Move faster," Half-Blood said, his voice deep and full of disgust. "You are slowing down the whole deck." Said nothing, he never said anything. Words only made things worse. The hours passed slowly. His hands became raw from handling the sharp edges of broken metal. His back ached from bending over the sorting bins. When the shift finally ended, he walked back to his sleeping corner, a small space behind a heating pipe where he had placed a thin blanket. It was the warmest spot he could find, and no one else wanted it because it smelled like rust. He lay down and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere above him, beyond the metal walls of the ship, there were stars. He had seen them once, through a small window in a corridor he was not supposed to enter. They had been beautiful, tiny points of light scattered across the blackness of space. He had wondered if any of those stars had planets where humans lived. He had wondered if they would accept someone like him. He doubted it. The said humans were weak and emotional. They said humans cared too much about worthless things like feelings and kindness. Did not know if that was true. He had never met a human. But sometimes, late at night, he hoped they were different from the. He hoped they would not hate him just for existing. 3 months later, everything changed. The Galactic Council had negotiated a prisoner exchange between the Empire and the United Human Government. Human captives would be returned to their people, and prisoners would be sent home. Heard the news from the other workers. They laughed about it, saying the humans were pathetic for begging to get their weak people back. Felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Maybe they would include him in the exchange. Maybe the humans would take him because of his mother. Maybe he would finally leave this ship and find a place where he could belong. He waited for days. He watched the human prisoners being gathered and prepared for transport. He saw them walk through the corridors, their faces tired but hopeful. Some of them looked at him with confusion. They could see the human features in his face, the shape of his nose and the warmth in his golden eyes. But they did not speak to him. They did not know who he was. On the day of the exchange, stood near the docking bay, hoping someone would call his name. He watched the humans board the transport ship. He watched the doors begin to close. No one called for him. He ran to the officer in charge and asked if there had been a mistake. The officer looked at him with cold, yellow eyes and told him there was no mistake. The humans had not asked for him. He was not on any list. He belonged to no one. The transport ship departed and watched it disappear into the stars. 2 weeks later, the command decided what to do with him. They could not keep him on the warship. He was a reminder of something shameful, something that should never have happened. But they also could not kill him openly, because that would require acknowledging his existence in official records. So they chose a different solution. They dropped him on Nexus 7. Nexus 7 was a trading station on the far edge of known space. It was a lawless place, filled with criminals, smugglers, and refugees. The Galactic Council had no authority there. No species claimed responsibility for it. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear. The shuttle landed just long enough for them to push out the door. He fell onto the dirty metal platform and looked up in time to see the shuttle rise into the sky. Within seconds, it was gone. He was alone. For the first time in his life, no one was watching him. No one was telling him what to do. But he also had no food, no money, and no place to sleep. The station was loud and crowded. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors, shouting in languages he did not understand. The air smelled like smoke and oil and something sour. Found a corner behind a cargo container and sat down. He pulled his knees to his chest and tried to make himself small. He did not know what to do next. He did not know how to survive in a place like this. But he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to give up. His mother had died bringing him into this world. He owed it to her to keep living, even if the whole galaxy wanted him dead. He closed his eyes and listened to the noise of the station around him. Somewhere out there, beyond the chaos, there had to be a place for him. He just had to find it. 3 months passed on Nexus 7 and learned how to survive. He learned which alleys were safe to sleep in and which ones belonged to dangerous gangs. He learned how to find food in garbage piles behind restaurants. He learned how to run fast when someone wanted to hurt him. The station was not kind to anyone, but it was especially cruel to him. The other species avoided him like he carried a disease. They would spit at him whenever he walked past. The tall, pale pretended he did not exist at all. Even the criminals who ran the black markets wanted nothing to do with him. A hybrid was bad luck, they said. Nobody would do business with anyone who kept such a creature around. Grew thin and tired. His scales lost their color. The wounds on his body healed slowly because he never had enough to eat. Sometimes he would go 3 or 4 days without food, and his vision would blur at the edges. He wondered if this was how he would die. Alone and forgotten, rotting in some dark corner of a station that nobody cared about. One night he made a mistake. He was so hungry that he could not think clearly, and he tried to steal food from a merchant. The merchant caught him and called his friends. There were 5 of them, all clicking their sharp mandibles in anger. They dragged into an alley and beat him until he could not move. When they were done, they left him lying in a pool of his own blood. His ribs were broken. His left eye was swollen shut. He could taste blood in his mouth, and every breath felt like fire in his chest. He lay there in the darkness and waited to die. He did not know how long he was there. Hours, maybe. The cold of the metal floor seeped into his bones. He could hear the distant sounds of the station, people laughing and arguing and going about their lives. None of them knew he was there. None of them would care if they did. Then he heard footsteps, not the clicking of legs or the heavy thud of boots. These were softer, lighter, human footsteps. A face appeared above him. It was a woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her eyes were sharp and suspicious, and she looked at him like he was a problem she did not want to deal with. "What do we have here?" she said. Another figure stepped into view. This one was a man, older, with gray in his short hair and lines around his eyes. He crouched down beside and studied his face for a long moment. "He is half human," the man said quietly. "Look at his eyes, look at his face." "I can see that," the woman replied. "But he is also half Jake. Getting involved with him could bring us trouble we do not need." The man named Jake did not answer right away. He reached out and touched his forehead gently, checking for fever. His hand was warm. It was the first kind touch had felt in years. "We are not leaving him here, Amy," Jake said finally. "Help me carry him." Amy made an annoyed sound, but she did not argue. Together, they lifted from the ground and carried him through the corridors of the station, drifted in and out of consciousness. He saw flashing lights and heard voices he did not recognize. He felt himself being placed on something soft, and then a bright light shone in his face. When he woke up, he was lying in a small medical bay. A woman with kind brown eyes and short curly hair was standing over him, adjusting a machine beside his bed. "Easy there," she said when she saw him move. "You have 3 broken ribs and a lot of cuts. You are lucky to be alive." Tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The woman gave him water through a small tube, and he drank it gratefully. "I am Laura," she said. "I am the medic on this ship. You are safe now." Safe did not know what that word meant anymore. Over the next few days, Laura took care of him. She cleaned his wounds, gave him medicine for the pain, and made sure he ate small meals to rebuild his strength. A nervous man named Ben came to visit once, looking at with obvious distrust. Ben was the engineer, Laura explained. He did not trust strangers, especially ones with blood. Amy checked on him too, though she did not say much. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching him like she expected him to attack at any moment. Understood her fear. He had seen it in the eyes of every species he had ever met. On the 4th day, Jake came to see him. The captain sat down in a chair beside the bed and looked at for a long time without speaking. Looked back at him, waiting. He expected questions. He expected demands. He expected to be told he had to leave as soon as he could walk. Instead, Jake asked him something no one had ever asked before. "What do you want to do with your life?" The question hit him like a punch to the chest. He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. He had never thought about it. He had never been allowed to think about it. His entire life had been about surviving the next day, the next hour, the next minute. The idea of wanting something, of choosing something, was completely foreign to him. "I do not know," he finally said. His voice was rough and weak. Jake nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. "Let me tell you how things work on my ship," he said. "Everyone here earns their place. We all have jobs and we all look out for each other. It does not matter where you come from or what species you are. What matters is what you do." He leaned forward slightly. "If you want to stay, you can learn, you can work, you can become part of this crew, not as some experiment, but as one of us, a member of the family." Stared at him. He was waiting for the catch, the condition, the price he would have to pay, but Jake just looked at him with patient, honest eyes. "You would do that," whispered, "for someone like me." Jake smiled slightly. "There is no one like you. That is exactly why you belong here." For the first time in his life, felt tears forming in his eyes. He did not try to stop them. He did not have the strength to pretend anymore. "Yes," he said, "I want to stay." Jake stood up and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Welcome aboard the Wandering Star." The months that followed were the strangest of his life. For the first time, he was not surviving. He was living. Ben, the engineer, started teaching him how the ship worked. At first, Ben was cold and distant. He gave simple tasks and watched him with suspicious eyes, waiting for him to fail or cause trouble, but learned quickly. His hands were strong and steady, and his mind absorbed new information like dry ground absorbing rain. Within weeks, he could fix basic problems with the ship's systems. Within months, he understood things that had taken Ben years to master. "You are not bad at this," Ben admitted one day, standing beside in the engine room. It was the closest thing to a compliment he had ever given. Laura became something like a big sister to him. She introduced him to human music, playing old songs on a small speaker in the medical bay. The melodies were different from anything he had heard before. They were soft and warm, full of emotions that they would have called weak. Found himself listening to them over and over again, feeling things he could not name. She also gave him books to read, stories about heroes and villains, about love and loss, about people who faced impossible odds and refused to give up. Read them late at night in his small cabin, turning the pages with careful fingers. He had never known that words could make him feel so much. Amy took longer to warm up to him. She was careful by nature, always watching for danger, always planning 3 steps ahead. She did not trust easily and understood why. In her position, he would have felt the same way. But everything changed during a job gone wrong. The Wandering Star had been hired to transport cargo through a dangerous sector of space. Pirates operated in that area, preying on ships that did not have enough weapons or crew to fight back. Jake knew the risks, but the payment was good, and the ship needed fuel and supplies. The attack came without warning. 3 pirate vessels surrounded them, firing shots across their bow as a warning. Jake tried to negotiate, but the pirates were not interested in talking. They wanted the cargo, and they did not care who they had to kill to get it. The pirates boarded the ship through a breach in the lower deck. Amy led the defense, carrying a rifle and shouting orders to the small crew. Followed her, armed with a metal pipe because he had never learned to use a gun. They fought through the narrow corridors, pushing the pirates back inch by inch. But there were too many of them, and they were better armed. A pirate with a face aimed his weapon at Amy and saw that she would not be able to dodge in time. He did not think, he simply moved. He threw himself in front of her, using his body as a shield. The shot hit him in the shoulder, burning through his scales and into the flesh beneath. The pain was terrible, but he did not fall. He grabbed the pirate and threw him against the wall with all of his strength. The man crumpled and did not get up. Amy stared at him with wide eyes. "You saved me," she said. Looked at the blood running down his arm and managed a weak smile. That is what family does. From that day on, Amy treated him differently. She still teased him and called him names, but there was warmth behind her words now. She started training him to fight properly, showing him how to use weapons and how to defend himself without getting hurt. She was tough and demanding, but worked hard because he wanted to make her proud. Jake watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. He never said much but could see the approval in his eyes. The captain had taken a chance on him and was determined not to let him down. Eventually, the Wandering Star docked at a human colony called New Phoenix. It was a small settlement on a green planet, with farms and houses and children playing in the streets. Had never seen anything like it. He had never been to a place where people looked happy just to be alive. He expected the humans to treat him the way everyone else had. He expected fear and disgust and rejection. He prepared himself for the worst as he walked down the ship's ramp and stepped onto human soil for the first time. A group of children ran up to him almost immediately. They looked at his scales with big, curious eyes. "Are you a dragon?" one of them asked. Did not know what to say. "No," he managed. I am just different." "Can I touch your scales?" another child asked. "They look really cool." He knelt down and let them touch his arm. Their small fingers traced the pattern of his scales, and they laughed with delight. It was the first time anyone had ever touched him with wonder instead of disgust. Word of the hybrid traveling with humans spread quickly through the colony. Some people were hostile. They shouted insults and demanded that he leave. But many more were curious and kind. A baker named gave him fresh bread and told him he was welcome anytime. An old retired Marine named Pete shook his hand firmly and thanked him for protecting Amy. The colony governor, a serious woman named, called a meeting to discuss status. Some colonists wanted him gone. They said he was dangerous, that his blood made him a threat. But Jake stood up and spoke on his behalf. So did Amy and Ben and Laura. One by one, the crew of the Wandering Star told the colony what kind of person really was. Listened to everyone, then she made her decision. "This young man has risked his life for human beings," she said. "He has shown loyalty, courage, and honor. I am granting him provisional citizenship in the human government. He will have the same rights and protections as any of us." The room fell silent, could not believe what he was hearing. Citizenship, rights, protection. These were things he had never imagined he could have. Jake put his arm around his shoulders. "Welcome to humanity, kid," he said. Looked at the faces around him. Some were smiling, some were frowning, but for the first time in his life he felt like he belonged somewhere. He was not. He was not a mistake. He was human, at least in every way that mattered. But far away, in the cold halls of the Empire, news of his citizenship was spreading. And the reptilian lords were not pleased. The message came 3 weeks after received his citizenship. A diplomatic ship arrived at the edge of human space, broadcasting a formal demand to the United Human Government. The hybrid known as was property. His citizenship was illegal and invalid. The human government was required to revoke his status immediately and surrender him to the Empire for execution. Failure to comply would be considered an act of aggression. Heard the news while sitting in the common room of the Wandering Star. The ship's communication system picked up the broadcast, and everyone gathered to listen. When it ended, the room was silent. "They cannot be serious," Ben said finally. "They threw him away like garbage. Now they want him back." Amy shook her head slowly. "It is not about him. It is about pride. They cannot accept that a hybrid is living as a free person. It makes them look weak." Felt cold spreading through his chest. He had known this peace could not last. He had known that would come for him eventually, but hearing it made it real in a way he had not been prepared for. "I should leave," he said quietly. "If I disappear, they will have no reason to threaten humanity." Jake turned to look at him with hard eyes. "No," the captain said firmly. "You are not going anywhere." "But they will start a war because of me," argued. "People will die, human people. I am not worth that." Jake walked over to him and gripped his shoulders. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "You are one of us now. That means something. We do not abandon our people no matter what. If they want to fight, they will get one. But we will not hand you over like some piece of cargo." The human government agreed. The response to them was swift and clear. Was a citizen of humanity. His rights were protected by law. The demand for his surrender was rejected. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the crisis. Most of them urged humanity to comply with the demands. The ambassador said humans were foolish to risk war over one worthless hybrid. The ethereal representative suggested that sometimes sacrifice was necessary for the greater good. Admiral Gregg represented humanity at the council. He was a tall man with silver hair and a face that had seen many battles. He stood before the gathered aliens and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "You ask us to surrender one of our own," he said. "You ask us to hand over a young man whose only crime was being born. You tell us that peace is more important than principle, that we should throw away our values to avoid conflict." He paused and looked around the chamber. "Humanity does not measure a person by their blood or their genetics. We measure them by their heart. Has fought for humans. He has bled for humans. He has earned his place among us. And we will not betray him, not for peace, not for profit, not for anything." The council erupted in argument. Some species supported humanity, but most did not. The ambassador stormed out, declaring that the Empire would take what was rightfully theirs. War seemed certain. They assembled a massive fleet near the border of human space. 30 warships, each one bristling with weapons, waiting for the order to attack. Human colonies began preparing for evacuation. Families packed their belongings and said goodbye to their homes. Soldiers kissed their loved ones and boarded transport ships. The crew of the Wandering Star volunteered for reconnaissance missions. They were small and fast, able to slip into space and gather intelligence without being detected. Jake did not want to take on these missions, but insisted. "This is my fight," he said. "More than anyone else's, I need to be part of it." Jake agreed reluctantly. They flew deep into enemy territory, dodging patrols and scanning installations. On their third mission, they discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in the records of a remote outpost, Ben found files that had been classified at the highest level. They contained information about a secret program that had been running for centuries. They had created dozens of hybrids over the years, mixing their DNA with various species to produce soldiers and workers. The hybrids were designed to be obedient and expendable. When they were no longer useful, they were terminated. Every single one of them had been killed. Was the last hybrid alive, the only one who had survived long enough to escape? They were people, Laura whispered as she read through the files. All of them. They had thoughts and feelings and hopes, and they killed them like they were nothing. Stared at the names and dates on the screen. Dozens of hybrids created and destroyed over hundreds of years. He could have been any one of them. He should have been one of them. "We need to share this," Amy said. "The whole galaxy needs to see what they have been doing." Jake nodded. "Get me a secure channel to Admiral." They transmitted the evidence to Earth. Within hours, it was broadcast across the galaxy. The records showed everything: the experiments, the terminations, the cold efficiency with which they had treated living beings as disposable tools. The response was immediate. Species that had supported them began to question their alliance. The Galactic Council demanded an investigation. Even those who had wanted humanity to surrender grew quiet and uncomfortable. The everything. They called the evidence fake, a human trick designed to make them look bad. But the details in the files were too specific, too complete. The galaxy was starting to see the truth. On the bridge of the wandering star, heading back to human space, watched the stars pass by outside the window. He thought about the hybrids who had come before him. He thought about their lives and their deaths and the names that nobody remembered. "I will not let them be forgotten," he said quietly. Jake stood beside him, his reflection visible in the glass. "You will not have to," the captain said. "We are going to make sure the whole galaxy remembers, and we are going to make sure they pay for what they did." The storm was coming, but humanity was ready to face it. The battle began at dawn on the human calendar, though in space there was no real morning or night. The fleet crossed the border and headed straight for the human colony of New Phoenix, the same colony that had granted his citizenship. Admiral Gregg commanded the Human Defense Force from the bridge of the flagship, a massive warship called the Resolute. He had 15 ships under his command, less than half the size of the enemy fleet. The odds were not good, but no one talked about retreating. This was where humanity would make its stand. Stood in the engine room of the Resolute, working alongside Ben and a team of human engineers. Jake had pulled some strings to get the whole crew of the Wandering Star assigned to the flagship. They wanted to fight together, and the Admiral had agreed. The first shots were fired at 900 hours. They came in fast and hard, their weapons tearing through space with deadly precision. The human ships returned fire, their shields absorbing the damage as they maneuvered into defensive positions. For hours the battle raged. Ships exploded on both sides, their crews lost to the cold void of space. Worked without rest, repairing damaged systems and keeping the Resolute running. His hands moved faster than any human engineer could manage, and his strength let him lift equipment that would normally require machines. "Hull breach on Deck 7, a voice announced over the intercom. "Boarding party detected." Looked at Ben. They both knew what that meant, though were inside the ship. "Go," Ben said. "I can handle things here." Grabbed a weapon and ran. The corridors of the Resolute were chaos. Alarms blared, smoke filled the air, and the sounds of fighting echoed from every direction. Followed the noise until he found the breach, a jagged hole in the ship's hull where a shuttle had forced its way through. Warriors poured through the opening, their scales gleaming under the emergency lights. They were tall and powerful, armed with blades and energy weapons, trained from birth to kill. Human security teams tried to hold them back, but they were being overwhelmed. Charged into the fight. He moved with speed and strength that surprised even the. He had been beaten down his entire life, but all that pain had made him tough. All those years of survival had taught him how to fight. He struck down one warrior, then another, pushing them back toward the breach. Then he saw him. A commander stepped through the opening, his scales darker than the others, his eyes cold and ancient. He carried a blade that hummed with energy, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Recognized him instantly, the shape of his face, the pattern of his scales. This was the officer who had fathered him, his biological father. Looked at with something that might have been curiosity. "So you are the one causing all this trouble," he said. His voice was deep and calm. "I must admit, I never expected you to survive this long." "I am full of surprises," replied. The two of them faced each other while the battle continued around them. Human soldiers and warriors fought and died on all sides, but for a moment, it was just the two of them. "Come back with us," said. "You do not belong with these humans. You are whether you like it or not. Return to the Empire and I will make sure you are treated fairly." Fairly almost laughed. "You threw me away, you left me to die. Now you want me back because I embarrassed you." "I am offering you a chance to live," said. "The humans cannot protect you. They are weak and sentimental. They will lose this battle, and when they do, you will die with them." Shook his head slowly. "You do not understand," he said. "The humans did something you never did. They saw me as a person. They gave me a choice. They gave me a home. I would rather die fighting for them than live one more day under rule." Sighed as if disappointed. "Then you will die." He attacked with blinding speed, his blade cutting through the air towards throat, dodged and countered but was faster and stronger. The commander had decades of training and experience, had only his determination and his rage. They fought through the corridor, their weapons clashing again and again. Took cuts on his arms and chest, his blood mixing with the oil and smoke in the air. He was losing and he knew it, was simply too skilled. But then he heard footsteps behind him. Amy appeared with a squad of human marines, firing at the boarding party. Jake was with her, carrying a rifle of his own. They cut through the enemy warriors and rushed to his side. Saw that he was outnumbered. He gave one last look of cold contempt, then retreated through the breach with his remaining soldiers. The shuttle detached and fled into space. At that same moment, the tide of the battle turned. 40 new ships dropped out of hyperspace, bearing the flag of Earth. Reinforcements from the home world, answering the call to defend their adopted son. The fleet, already battered and exhausted, could not withstand the fresh assault. They retreated. The battle was over. Humanity had won. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Council formally condemned the hybrid program. Sanctions were imposed on the Empire. Other species that had once supported them now kept their distance. The evidence from the wandering star had changed everything. Was invited to Earth to stand before the United Human Assembly. He had never seen the human home world before. It was beautiful, covered in blue oceans and green forests and cities that sparkled in the sunlight. The assembly chamber was enormous, filled with thousands of representatives from every human colony. Walked to the center of the floor, surrounded by the crew of the Wandering Star. Jake stood on his right, Amy on his left. Ben and Laura were right behind him. The Speaker of the Assembly, an elderly woman with kind eyes, addressed the chamber. "Came to us as an outcast," she said. "Abandoned by the species that created him, rejected by a galaxy that saw him as worthless. But humanity saw something different. We saw a person. We saw a brother." She turned to look at directly. Today, by unanimous vote of this assembly, we grant you full and permanent citizenship in the United Human Government. You are not provisional. You are not temporary. You are one of us, now and forever. The chamber erupted in applause. Felt tears running down his face, but he did not try to hide them. He looked at Jake, who was smiling proudly. He looked at Amy, who was crying too, though she would probably deny it later. He had spent his whole life being told he did not belong anywhere. The had thrown him away. The galaxy had abandoned him, but humanity had opened its arms and welcomed him home. Jake put his hand on shoulder, the same way he had done on that first day aboard the Wandering Star. "How does it feel?" he asked. Looked out at the sea of human faces, at the people who had fought for him, bled for him, and refused to give him up. "It feels like home," he said. And for the first time in his life, he meant it.